Gmara on 42a, Ben Basement Aleph. Okay, so yesterday we discussed the 1 second. We discussed the halacha, the law that when they go out to battle, the kohen gathers them together and makes a few statements about who's exempt from battle, and we'll discuss that more. That statement has to be said in Lashon Kodesh. Then he also gives a pep talk, Okay, how do we know that this has to be said? The Gemara says the source is V'nigesh HaKohen. The Gemara says, my kamar, how do you see that it has to be Lashon Kodesh? The Gemara says, this is what he wants to say. Shenemar v'dibar. Because it says the Kohen will speak to the people. Ulahalan Omer, and it says elsewhere in that Moshe Yedaber v'Elokim Yanenu b'Kollel. When God gave the people His Torah, it says Moshe spoke, and God told him what to say. It's just like the 10 Commandments were spoken in Hebrew. Afkan b'Lashon HaKodesh, here too, the commandments of the Kohen Mashuach have to be the top general have to be in Hebrew. The Kohen steps forward and speaks to the people. He gives them the pep talk, and then he says who's exempt from conscription. Okay, Yachal Kol Kohen Shiurtza. Maybe I would think that it's any Kohen. And then the Shaitrim, these would be the generals or the colonels. Then they also talk to the groups. Each one of them gathers his battalion and speaks to them. So Mat Shaitrim b'mimuna, just like the Shaitrim, the colonels and the lieutenants are all appointed. Av Kohen b'mimuna. The first Kohen that speaks, he's at least a shaiter, meaning he's an appointed Kohen. It's not just that we have there's a military rule. Whenever we go to battle, we read this. Oh, and by the way, it has to be said by Kohen. So they whoever's a Kohen, come read this for everybody. It doesn't work. It has to be an appointed Kohen. The Kohen is appointed to go to battle. They have a Kohen Gadol. Maybe it's the Kohen Gadol. He's the one who has to read it because he's appointed. So Gemara says, "Do me the shaiter." It has to be similar to one of the colonels. Just like a colonel has somebody on top of him. So the Kohen who's the Mashuach, the general, there's another Kohen that's more important than him, and that would be the Kohen Gadol. The Gemara says Kohen Gadol Nami Hekemelech. The Kohen Gadol also is not the boss. There's the king. The king tells the Kohen Gadol what to do. The Gemara says you need somebody who's more important than him in his field. And in the Kohen Gadol's field, there's nobody more important than him. The aim is Skan. Maybe it's the assistant Kohen Gadol. Like we said, Skan is if the Kohen Gadol dies, the Skan takes over. It's not just if he dies, if there is some incapacitation or he becomes tamei, etc., and he can't serve, the Skan serves instead. So the Gemara says, Skan lav memunahu. The Skan is not really a position because the entire position is second in command. It's not even second in command. You're the relief pitcher. Your whole job is just to relieve somebody else. You don't have a real job. You don't count for I guess the relief pitcher does count for the roster, but in this case, the Skan is not on the roster.
The air in the spare.
What was that?
The air in the spare.
Yeah.
Rabbi, since you made yourself vulnerable to an opening, it reminds me of a story. An old woman had 2 sons. One went away to sea, and the other became vice president of the United States, and neither was ever heard from again.
Yes, indeed. The Tanya we learned 5 lines in the bottom of the page, middle of the line.
Thank you.
The Tanya Amar Chanina Skana Gehanim, Rav Chanina, who was himself a Skana Gehanim, what did he say? Lama Skan Mimuna. Why is a Skan appointed? If there's an invalidating event that occurs, in other words, the Kohen becomes tamei or he dies, then the Skan takes over. Okay. he begins with the words Shema Yisrael. Hear, O Israel. Here, listen to me. Ma'ashna Shema Yisrael. Why does he start with those words? Amar v'yechanan mishum Reb ben Yochai, in the name of Reb ben Yochai, right? His yard site was yesterday. Amar l'Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael afilu like yamtem el kriya shema shachris v'arvis yetin mimsarim biyodam. If you fulfilled even the basic requirement of saying Shema in the morning and the evening, then you will not be handed over to the enemy. Okay. Now we get to the sort of pep talk that he gives them. Al yerach lavavchem al tiru. Don't be scared, basically. And war in those days was much more of a contact event than war is today. People die before they even hear the bullets coming. It wasn't like that in the past. They say in London during the bombardment of London, they said either you hear a V2 or you won't. There was no warning. Yeah. It's British humor. Okay, so he would talk to them. So there's a real fear. Battle was a very fearful, gruesome event. So he would speak to them twice. Achas b'sfar v'achas b'milchama. So sfar is sort of the collection point. Sfar literally means the border. So they would all get to the, at some distance from the front lines. There would be some sort of collection point, and there he'd make his first announcement. B'achas b'milchama, and one, just before they were sent them out to the front lines. B'achas b'milchama b'sfar ma'huaymer. What would he say b'sfar on the border? We're on top of Membeis Ambeis 42b, first word on top of the page. Shimu divrei ma'archem v'chama v'chizru v'machama. V'chizru. Okay, so at the border, we'll get to this in a moment. He would say about all the people that don't have to go to battle. And we'll soon see there were two groups of people that were exempt from battle. Those that did not show up in the first place, they were given a complete p'tur, an exemption. And those that had their military service deferred. So these people, the deferred people, they would be the ground support. In Israel they call these the jobnika. People that were in the military but weren't in combat units. Okay. What would he say at the battlefield? And there he would say, basically four ways that you shouldn't be scared. Can I get our four things that the non-Jews would do to get them scared? Magifin, they would bang their shields together, specifically to get people scared. Umarian, they would blow horns. Svachin, they would scream. Veroimsim, they would get the horses to pound the ground to make noise. Now, this is in addition to the other two sounds of war, which Rashi points out, which is tzich charavis and hagavas treis and shivas kalgasan, which is the banging of the swords against the helmets and the swords against the shields. Rashi says that is the war itself. It's not something that's done to scare people. That is the sound of war. The other ones were done specifically to scare the enemy. So that's why he encourages them not to be scared. Plishtim bo ben itzchayna shel Goliath. The Plishtim came with the victory of Goliath, and what was his end? Goliath, and had an ignoble end. His head rolled off his head by King David, and his massive frame. He was a giant. Just collapsed on the ground. This is in front of his entire camp, in front of all his soldiers. So the Gemara is going to discuss a little bit about Goliath in this encounter with David. Goliath, Amr of Yechanan, Sha'amad Begiloi Panim. Why was his name Goliath? Because he stood up with a tremendous amount of chutzpah to God. In front of God. Shenemar, Brulachem Ish. See, what happened was the military sort of was standing behind him, and he stood before them and he said, just send somebody here and let's see what he can do to me. Rulachem Ish. Now, who is that Ish? Who's that person he was talking about? The Gemara says it was a code word for God. Ish is a code word for God. He basically said, let God fight with me, and even he can't fight with me. Shenemar Hashem Ish Melchama. Hashem is a man of strength. Ish. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, so God said to him, Hareini mapilo aydei ben ish. I will have him succumb to a person who's a, son of a man. Shenemar v'David ben Ish Ephrosi. Ben Ish Ephrosi Hazeh. David was the son of the person from Ephros, the Ish Ephros, which was Yishai. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rameir. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rameir, B'shloshim mekaymes laktu piv l'oiser Rasha. This wicked fellow Goliath, in 3 places his mouth spoke. He spoke against God. The first one is Echad Brulachem Ish. Go find me a man. And again, the man here is a reference to God. The Yerid Elai, and he'll come fight with me. The Idach, another one, Im Yuchal Hilochem Iti V'Hikani. If he could fight with me and I'll kill him. It's not a reference to a person, it's a reference to God. The Idach, like Amar David, another one, he's talking to David, and he says, so David is does not look like a warrior. That's for sure. He doesn't have that build. So he turns to David, he says, am I a dog? Because you're coming with me with sticks. 1 second. Okay, I'm sorry. So basically what he said was he spoke of his own demise rhetorically, but that's actually what happens. So the first one is he said 1 second. He says, choose a person and let him come down to me. That's exactly what happened there. Because the person did come down to him and kill him. And another one is, let's see if he can fight with me. And indeed, a person did end up fighting with him and he and actually killed him. And the last one is where he says, am I a dog that you're coming at me with sticks? And the answer was basically yes. And he was killed like a dog. Okay, so Gemara says, David Nami Amrlai. David also spoke about himself. He said, and you're coming at me with a sword, with a what's a chanis? Spear and a javelin. Thank you. Hadar Amrlai. Okay, so David also speaks of his own demise. He speaks of the enemies coming at him. Gemara says no, because then he continues and he says, Hadar Amrlai, I'm coming to fight you. B'shem Hashem Sevakais Elokei Yisrael Elokei Ma'arochais Yisrael Asher Chirafta. I'm coming with God, the King of Hosts, the God of the Jews, who you've ridiculed. There we go. Thank you. Defamed. Vayigash Haplishti Hashkin B'Harav. The Plishti, the Philistine, which was Goliath, he woke up day and night. This was going on. What's the significance of day and night? So as to prevent them from saying Kriya Shema. Like we just saw, Kriya Shema is the basic mitzvah that will protect you in battle. Right? Why did he begin with Shema Yisrael when he started giving the pep talk? Because saying Shema Yisrael is enough to save a person from the unfortunate calamities of battle. Okay, he stood there for 40 days. Equivalent to the 40 days that it took for the Torah to come down. So measurement went up to Shemayim. It took him 40 days to bring the Torah back down to the Jewish people. An Ish Habinim left Machnas Pelishtim. What does the word Binim mean? My Binim. Amar Rav says, Shemavona Mikol Mum. Binim means he was a built man. This guy was in the gym. He was, good looking, strong, powerful guy. With Shmuel says, Beinoini Sheva Achav. There were 4 brothers, each of them were a giant, and he was the middle of them. He was neither the weakest nor the strongest. The bear of Shila Amar, Reb Shila said, Shehu Osai Kibinyan. He was as built as a wall, as a building. He was literally a fortress. Rav Yechon Amar Barmea Papi V'Chodot Nani. Mevuna means he was. So over here, the explanation Rashi translates these words is that he was the child of 100 adulterers and 1 father. because the night that Arpa turned around, remember, Goyes' mother was Arpa. She was previously married to Machlon, right? Machlon was the son of Elimelech, who was the leader of the Jewish people. Elimelech was, right, this is what we read on Rus, on Shavuos. We're reading it in 16 days. Basically, Elimelech ran away because he was sort of a timid coward and could not lead the people through a challenging time. There was a hunger. He could afford to live himself. He was very wealthy, but he could not afford to support everybody else who was starving. So he ran away to Mayav. His sons, Machlon and Killian, married two Maavi women, Rus and Arpa. Eventually, they were killed. Elimelech was killed, meaning killed by God. God struck down and killed Elimelech. He killed Machlon and Killian. The wife of Elimelech, Naomi, turns back with Rus, right? And Arpa, sort of, you have that intersection where Arpa gives her mother-in-law a kiss and goes back to Mayav, and Rus stays with Naomi. So that night, Arpa slept with at least 100 men, 101 men, and we'll talk more. She was extremely promiscuous, and only one of them fathered Goliath. Okay, the Goliath Shmai, Migas. His name was Goliath, and he was literally means he was in the city of Gas. Now, Gas means a city, but it also means a press. Tani Rav Yosef shakol doshen es imay kegas. Everyone, pardon my language, everyone treated his mother like a press. Ksiv ma'ores v'karinan ma'archais. It says he came from the ma'ores plishtim, from the caves, and it's read as ma'archais. Ma'archais sort of means the ranks. The military system. Tani Rav Yosef says the reason why it was called Ma'ores shakol ha'eru be'imay. So hara sort of is the initial act of intimacy, and everyone had that type of act with his mother, Arpa, who was extremely promiscuous. The Gemara says ksiv harpa uksiv Arpa. Goliath is called the son of Arpa and the son of Harfa. It's the same person. Rav Shmuel, Chad Amar 1 says, Harfa Shma, her name was Harfa. V'lomenik Shma Arpa. Why was she called Arpa? Shakol Arfanaisim Achara. Because everyone, obviously she was very promiscuous, and everyone laid with her back from her backside. The Chad Amar 1 says, Arpa Shma, her name was Arpa. V'lomenik Shma Harfa. Why was she called Harfa? She called Doshanaisik Harifais. Again, everyone pressed her like they press ground wheat. And the pasuk says, "Vatikach ha'isha v'tifres hamosach al pnei habe'er v'tishtach olav harifais." 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Now over here we see that harifais is something that is pressed. So it makes sense that her name was actually Arpa. Why was she called Harpa? Because she was treated like pressed wheat by all the men surrounding her. Another source. If a mortar is being used in a pestle to grind the wheat, ba'oling. They translate the Eli. The Eli is typically like a large. What was that? Roots. Okay. There were 4 children that were born to Harpa. This is Arpa. And they all fell into the hands of David and his servants. Who are they? These are the names of the four giants. Saf, Modin, Goliath, Yishbi, and they fell Benaiv in the city of Naiv. But how do we know that they all fell in the hands of David? King David. The verse states, "Vatishak Arpa l'chamaisa v'rustov kabal." Arpa gave a kiss to her mother-in-law and turned around to Moav and a life of promiscuity. And v'rustov kabal, Rus connected with Naomi and stayed with her. Amar Yitzchak says, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, God said, "Yevayu b'nei hanashuka v'yipli b'yad b'nei hadvuka." The children, the sons of the one who gave the kiss will fall into the one who clinged. In other words, Arpa's children will fall into the hands of Rus's children, Rus's descendants. Darash Rova taught B'schar Arba Demois Sharida Arpa Chamaisa Zachsav Yatzim Arba Giberim. Because the 4 tears that Arpa cried when she departed from Naomi, her mother-in-law, so therefore she merited that her children were four Giberim. These were mighty generals. Shenamar Vatisena Kollel Vatifkena Ait. She lifted her voice and she cried again. 4 words. It's part of her tears. There were 4 tears, and she merited 4 Giberim. Exhibit says Chetz Chanisai. The arrow of his shaft of a spear. Karina, and we read it as Eitz Chanisai, the wood of his spear. Amar Belazar Adayan like Yano Lachatz Shvacha Shel Oiser Rasha. The Torah speaks of the might of this wicked Goliath. It doesn't even say half of his might. Mikan, from here we see Chetz is read as Chatzi, is half. Mikan also Saper B'Shvachan Shorashon. From here we see that it is prohibited to praise the wicked. So the Gemara says that's the case. So why do we mention anything about Goliath's strength? The Gemara says to let you know the praise of David. That David basically took on a mighty warrior. Okay, the next example of a general was Shoivach. B'nei Bo ben Itzchanish Shoivach. B'nei came with the victory of Shoivach, their general. Ksiv Shoivach, Ksiv Shoifach. There's 2 different names he's called. One's Shoivach and one is Shoifach. Rabbi Shmuel, Chadam, one says Shoifach Shmai. His name is Shoifach. Why was he called Shoivach? Sha'asi Kishoivach. He was built like a Shoivach. 1 second. Okay, but how does that mean he was built strong?
I don't know.
Shoivach is a nest, basically.
Maybe there's sturdy construction.
What was that?
It says because it was tall.
He was tall. Got it. I guess the dove's nest is tall.
Yeah, there's a long pole and they.
Got it.
Oh.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. So he was very tall, like a shoivach, like a nest, which is put on a high pole. One says shoivach Shemai, his name is shoivach. V'lomanik or Shemai shoivach. Why was he called shoivach? Shoivach means to pour. Shekala roya is a nishbach l'fan of kikitain. Again, pardon the reference here. Basically, if anyone's ever spoken to, I've met soldiers a few times. One of the things I'll tell you is that it's impossible to control your countenance when you're on a battlefield. It's basically impossible. All soldiers carry an extra pair of underwear. And basically this guy was so mighty that as soon as people looked at him, they sort of melted and they could not control their ability to, their bowels. Okay.
They have problems with their consonants and their vowels. I guess you're suffering from an consonant.
Ashbasai. Okay, so this is we'll just read it and then we'll explain it. Ashbasai literally means a garbage heap. Kekever pasuach, like an open grave pit. Kulam giberim, they were all mighty. Rav Shmuel have a debate here. Rav Ami, Rav Ami, Rav Asi. Some say it was Rav Ami and Rav Asi. Chadamar, one opinion says, B'shosha zark and chetz, when they shoot an arrow, Eisen ashboses shachalolim. They make piles of corpses. They kill multiple people with one arrow. Maybe you'll think that these are, experts in close battle. It's not the reason why their arrows are killing many people. It's not because they're skilled, but because they're mighty. Another opinion says when these people were so mighty, when they relieved themselves, they would make huge piles of whatever. Okay, their bowel movements create large piles. Sorry.
Moving into position.
Maybe you think that these people have diarrhea or something. They have some bowel problem. These were all mighty people, and because they were so strong and eating so much, that is why, this would occur. Amr of Mori says, the fact that Gemara needs to explain that somebody who makes piles of every bowel movement results in a very large amount of human feces. The fact that Gemara has to explain that isn't an illness means that typically it would be an illness. In other words, if the guy was a mighty soldier, so then it's not an illness. But for a regular person, it is an illness.
Last
The
one.
Gemara says, we're done. What's the difference? So somebody can go ahead and daven. Okay, now that we mentioned an opinion of Rav Ami and Rav Asi, so we mentioned another opinion. Daiga b'leiv ish yisicheno. The person has daiga. How do you say that? Concern, anxiety. Anxiety is probably the best word. Dread. Yeah. The person has dread or he's anxious. So b'leiv ish in the heart of a person. Yisicheno. He should talk. He should speak it. What does that mean? Rav Ami and Rav Asi. Chad Amar yisicheno midaitoi. He should move it away. He should stop thinking so much about what's causing him dread. The other opinion is he should speak it over with somebody else as a way to resolve his anxiety. So he gives the pep talk and he says, yeah, you see, you had these generals, Shaivach and Goliath, mighty people, and they fell because they came with the conviction of their own, gym workouts. But you come with the conviction of God, and therefore you'll be victorious. Okay. 1 second. And he says, Hashem Alekechem, God is with you, and he's going out to battle with you. Why is he explaining this? God's name and the main name and other names are all in the Aron, and the Aron went out to battle with them. And you find similarly, Moshe sent. Okay, so Moshe, this is a battle that Moshe had with Midian. So you remember the daughters of Midian seduced specifically the tribe of Reuven, but all Jews, and eventually Zimri went ahead and had an affair with the Midiani princess. I'm sorry. Okay, so following that, and this was orchestrated by Bilam, and afterwards, God told Moshe Rabbeinu to go out and destroy the nation of Midian for knowingly, seducting the people, so that God should be angry with them. Moshe sent them 1,000 people in each unit. As Pinchas. He sent them together with Pinchas. Who's the Isam? In addition to the soldiers, he sent out a group of people. Elo Sanhedrin. That was the Sanhedrin. Pinchas Zemashuach Muhammad. Pinchas was the general, Uklei HaKodesh, and the vessels of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, Ze Aron v'Luchais Shabai. This is the Aron, the Ark of the Covenant, with the Luchais, with the tablets that Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah on, were in the Aron. The Chatzaitzos Hatrua, and the trumpets, which Elo HaShofros, these were shofars. And that's how they went out to battle. So they went out to battle literally with, so to speak, with God with them, in as the Ark of the Covenant, representation. Tana, we learned it was not for naught that Pinchas was the leader of that battle. To pay back the father of his mother. Shenemar. Like we see, the Midyanim sold Yosef down to slavery. So evidently, in Pinchas's bloodline, he was a descendant of Yosef, who was sold by the Midyanim to Mitzrayim. So he went back to take vengeance on the selling of his ancestor Yosef. Okay. So the Gemara asks, "Lememra, do you mean to say the Pinchas me Yosef Asi? That Pinchas came from the tribe? Now Pinchas clearly came from the tribe of his father was a Kohen, right? His father was Elazar, right? Pinchas ben Elazar. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron Kohen. We're talking here about his mother's side. However, the Gemara has another question. V'aksiv. The Elazar ben Aaron lokach laim ibnois putia loyla isha. Elazar ben Aaron, his father. Who did his father marry? In other words, who's his mother? The daughter of Putiel. Who is Putiel? My love must be the Osimi Yisroi. Putiel is a reference to Yisroi. Why? Why is Yisroi called Putiel? So Yisroi was sort of how do you say this? He was a truth seeker, and he went around the world and he tried out every single idol that there was. He himself was an ordained priest, and then when none of that worked out, then he became Jewish. So his grandfather sort of fattened calves for idol worship, and that's why he was called Putiel. So the Gemara says no. Pitbit means he sort of had a battle, and he conquered his evil inclination, like we saw with the event where he was seduced by the wife of Potiphar. So the Gemara says, but we learned in the Medrash that the Shvatim, the tribes were Mivazanaisa, Isim and Puti Zeb, and Shapitim of Aviim by Agolim Levis Chavim, Yehereg Nasim Yisrael. What happened was when Pinchas went ahead and killed Zimri, they sort of started mocking Pinchas. They said, you're the grandson of a convert. Your grandfather sort of also engaged in cardinal activity by supporting idol worship. Who do you think you are to kill the leader of a tribe? So evidently, it's clear that his grandfather was Yisroi. So Gemara says, okay, fine. If the father of his mother was from Yosef, then his mother's mother was from Yisroi. The ime Yosef, and if his mother's mother is from Yosef, avur the ime Yisroi. The mother of his father was from Yisroi. Putiel means there were two people that were called Putiel. There were two people whose name was Puti, and that's a reference to both Yisroi and to Yosef. Okay, now we get to the exemptions. In Jewish battle, very easy to get an exception from battle. What do they call this? Exemption.
Deferments?
Exemption deferments. We'll see. There's a difference. We'll get to it in a moment. Okay. The general, the colonels, the colonels, the lieutenants, they would tell the people as follows: Mia ish asher bona, and this happened by the Sfar, by the border. They'd say, Mia ish asher bona bayis chadash v'loy chanochai. Is there a person that built a house but hasn't yet lived in it? He's just finished construction. He should go back. If you build a storehouse for wheat, a house for animals, a house for wood, a house to store things. Both whether someone who bought it or someone who built it or someone who bought it. So you bought a house, you closed, but you haven't moved in yet. All these things you haven't moved in, so you haven't actually started using it. Or somebody who inherits, or someone who they gave it to him as a gift. Okay, who is the person who planted a vineyard but hasn't yet reaped the harvest? Whether it's a vineyard or whether it's 5 fruit trees, even if they're for 5 different varieties. Both somebody who planted it, give me a moment. Maverick is to graft, but what I believe it means here is that you're talking about grafting a female onto a male tree. So certain fruit trees have male and female varieties. The males don't produce, but they often result in a very much stronger tree. So common grafting technique was you take a female branch and you graft it onto a male tree. So you get the strong tree with the productive fruits.
That's what they're trying to do today with kids.
Right? Yeah. Someone who both or someone who makes multiple varieties by planting them together. Someone who bought or someone who inherited, or someone who received it as a gift. Somebody who married who's engaged to a woman, he has erison. He hasn't yet married her. Whether someone has erison with a bsula, a woman who's a virgin, none of them have been previously married, or whether she is a widow. Even if she's waiting for Yibam. Even if he finds out his brother passed away in war, so then he goes back from war so he can marry his brother's wife, if presuming that his brother did not have any children. Shaimin Divri Kain Me'arachim Milchama. They go out to the border town. They join the ranks of the military. They listen to the Kain's statement of the deferments. The Chayzer, and they go back and they get deferred. So they move to the ground, what they call the ground supports. In military terms, they call this the tail and the teeth, right? It's the teeth, the combat units. The tail is the logistics support. So these people would go into logistics. The Elo She'en and Chayzer, these are the people that would not go back. Somebody who builds himself a porch or an awning. Somebody who plants four fruit trees, or even if he plants five trees, but they're not fruit trees, or more than five trees that will not bear fruit. Somebody who remarries a woman he previously divorced, or if the marriage is prohibited, like an almana, a widow to a kohen gadol, grusha v'chalutza, divorcee or a chalutza to a kohen hedyet, mamzeres and asin Yisrael, a mamzer or nasan, these fake converts to Yisrael, bas Yisrael, the daughter of Yisrael, to a mamzer or nasan. Lo hayachayzer, he would not go back. Rabbi Yehudah would say, af habayne bayis al machayne, someone they call this someone who refurbished their house. They redid their house. He also is not exempt. Rabbi Eliezer says, af habayne beis levenim b'sharon. If someone builds a house, levenim are these heavy limestones in the area of Sharon, in Israel. So that area is not capable of holding heavy structures. And apparently the buildings need to be refurbished twice every 7 years. So every 3.5 years, the buildings need major repairs. So this is not a permanent structure, and therefore Lo Haychayzer does not go back. Okay. Now, all these people, like we said before, they're all in logistics. Elu she'ein zozim yim kaiman. The following people, they don't leave their houses. These people are exempt from military duty. They're not part of logistics either. And who are they? Bona bayis v'chanochai. He's in the middle of the first year of living in his house that he just built. Not a kerem b'chilalai. It's the fourth year or the fifth year, and he's actually enjoying. 1 second. Yeah, it's the middle of the fourth year, and he's in the middle of enjoying the fruits, but he hasn't finished it. Or hanoisis or sasli, or someone who just got married. Kindness is even somebody who married his yivama. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, for all these people, naki yia lebeisei shana echas. He'll be pure for his house for 1 year. Lebeisei, what does a house mean? It literally means the house. Abeisei yia, to the house. Zek karma. That's a reference to the vineyard. The simechas ishtay, and he'll be happy with the wife that he chose. Zu ishtay, it's his wife. Asher lakach lahavi asivimte, to include his yivama. So if he consummated his relationship, ein maspikim lehemayim umazon, they're not part. They don't support them with food and drink, and they don't fix the roads. In other words, these are people that are completely exempt from service. Okay, have a great morning. Yeah. Okay, sure.